Hi everyone, welcome to the Photoshop Show. Tonight we have an amazing show for you because we have somebody who's staying up very, very late to join us, Mr. Glyn Dewis. Yay!
Hey, how you doing?
If you've been on Google Plus at all, or you've been on the internet, or you're not sort of dead, then you probably know of Glyn Dewis. He is everywhere doing his amazing Photoshop and Lightroom tutorials, and we're so excited to have him tonight. He's also a pretty funny guy, so I think you're going to have fun with him. And Glyn is going to introduce himself to you in just a moment, but just to give you a little preview, we have a really heavy hitter panel tonight, all of whom have been our special guests in their own right, including Miss Erica Thornes. Hi everyone, welcome to the Photoshop Show. Tonight we have someone is playing there because we have somebody who's staying up very, very late to join us, Mr. Glyn Dewis. Yay! Is somebody playing back there? Check your browser. If you've been on Google Plus at all, or you've been on the internet, or you're not sort of dead, then you probably know of Glyn.
You have it playing in the background.
He's everywhere doing his amazing Photoshop and Lightroom tutorials, and we're so excited to have him. Somebody is playing. He's also a pretty funny guy. So I think you're going to have fun with him. Yay. Who was it?
It was Glyn's fault. The new kid.
Glyn did it.
The new kid. Okay, sorry, Jan, go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, so anyway, I was just going to say, and then I'm going to have all these people introduce themselves, that on our panel we have Erica Thornes, we have Sean Duggan, and we have Gene McCullough. And, of course, we have co-host Ron Clifford. So I hope that all those people will now tell you what they've been up to in the last couple of weeks and a little bit about where we can find them online. Starting with, let's see, how about Sean Duggan?
Okay, well, thanks for having me. It's always fun to come back and join you guys with the Hangout. Let's see, the last couple of weeks I have been, my new course on lynda.com was published this last week on creative video compositing with Photoshop. Very nice, very nice. So that's pretty cool. And then in 2 weeks, I'm heading off to Reykjavik, Iceland, to do a couple of day-long seminars for the local photography and design community in Reykjavik on Lightroom and Photoshop. And after that, I'm going to hang out and try to find some auroras to photograph.
How exciting. And listen, will you please get back with me about a date when you can come and show us that technique that you demonstrate in your lynda.com course, which is amazingly cool.
Yes, I know. We do have to set a date for that, and we shall.
Okay, that would be great. And basically, can you say in a nutshell what it is, just a teaser?
Well, there's a lot of video editing functionality in Photoshop, which a lot of people aren't aware of. And what I focus on more is doing video compositing, so compositing different video clips together or video and stills together using all the techniques that you may already know from Photoshop, layers, layer masks, blending modes. All of those can be used to create really interesting video composites. So we start with some fairly simple projects and kind of work our way up to get a little bit more complex and cool and involved. So a lot of fun stuff.
Oh, it's so amazing. It looks like nothing I've seen anybody else even showing, let alone explaining or teaching how to do. You know, these still images, like an example, correct me if I'm wrong, but an example of this beautiful photograph in Iceland, and everything is a still photograph except for the moving water, for example.
Right. Yeah. There's a few things that I've done with moving water and creating some kind of virtual locations and things like that. So there's a lot of cool projects in that course.
Neat. All right, well, we'll see you back for that for hopefully in a month.
Yeah, excellent.
And so thank you for joining us in the panel. I'm sure you'll have great questions for Glyn Dewis. And we also have in the panel Gene McCullough, who's been a guest before. Hi, Gene.
Hey, Jan, how are you?
Good. What you been up to?
Well, working on LightroomSecrets.com as usual, and recently had an article come out in Lightroom magazine. That's that online, that e-magazine for the iPad. And I believe, Sean, you just had one come out in the last edition too. It's on the slideshow module, so if you're interested to find out how you can get more power out of the slideshow module, pop on over to your iPad and look for Lightroom magazine.
Cool.
So I have a question about that. When would you use a slideshow in Lightroom? Is it an exportable slideshow, or is it just something that you have to have someone standing behind you at your computer to see?
No, you can export it to a video if you wanted to. the problem with slideshow module is that it's very limited. They haven't given it a lot of love yet. But the upside is that it's there in Lightroom. So a lot of wedding photographers that I talk to will throw pictures into that slideshow module and be able to project, just the basic shots from the day, right out of it while they're, capturing more images.
Makes sense. Great. And we also have with us Erica Thornes. How are you doing?
Good, good. I'm here down in San Diego, and I've just been enjoying our weather, which has been rather warm. And this past weekend, I went out to the desert, and I practiced some of the techniques I learned last week when we had the astrophotographers on of Carrie Ann and Daryl. So I've been practicing and showing those on my page on Facebook and on Google+. And I'm the only Erica Thornes, so you can find me. So it's kind of
I saw those photos. You did a great job of taking photographs at night with silhouettes in front of beautiful stars that just, colors. It was really nice.
It was fun. It was a fun experiment. I'm learning a lot from it. So this show has definitely inspired me more than once.
Cool. And Ron, do you want to say hello, and then we'll have Glyn introduce himself?
Yeah. Hi. Really, really excited. This is such a great panel tonight. I mean, I can't. Anyway, I'm all flustered because everybody's so talented here. It's just incredible. I do want to shout out. I have invited I'm doing a layers, masks, and modes little mini workshop online, and I've encouraged them all to tune in tonight because if they want to learn from a master, then Glyn is certainly the person to watch. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, that's great, Ron. We'll look for that. And then, Glyn, we're so glad to have you. Thank you so much for staying up so late, because you live where? Can't hear you because you're muted.
You're muted.
No, can you hear me? Yeah, right. Yeah. I'm based in Oxford in the UK, and just hearing that about the weather then in San Diego, man, I wish we had some of that over here. I'm not going to do the typical Englishman and complain about the weather, but it has been bad, so, be gentle tonight, all right?
But tell us something about you.
Okay, photographer and retoucher. I think I'm mainly known for the kind of stuff that I'm doing in Photoshop, but, that all comes hand in hand with the photography. I would suggest that maybe, blimey, 75% of what I'm doing now has gone down the kind of the teaching route, the training route. That just seems to have naturally happened that I moved over into that a couple of years ago. So I'm doing quite a lot of one-to-ones. We've just launched another workshop series which starts today, or it's been launched today anyway. And I'm really kind of grateful that doing what I'm doing allows me to travel quite a lot. So had I not been doing this, in fact before I even started doing this, I wasn't the most travelled person, but thankfully now, getting out there and teaching Photoshop and the photography has enabled me to go all kinds of places like the US, which I keep trying to stay in, but they keep kicking me back out again.
Well, listen, we all want to come over there. Everybody
we
wants.
can do a house swap. I'm more than happy to do a house swap.
Oh, okay.
We got to sign you up for a Texas tour, Glyn.
Oh, I'll tell you what, I'm all for that, big time. Yeah, big time.
Now, what is Oxford? Is where the university is, I assume. Is that right?
Oxford's where all the posh people live.
Like
well,
you, right?
Do you know what? I love speaking to you guys because you always say, "Oh, I love the way you speak." Over here, I sound so common and just normal, but you guys think I sound posh. So that's what I love speaking to you guys. But yeah, Oxford is. I suppose it's somewhere that most people would have heard of if they think of the UK. You've got London, Oxford. Everyone's heard of the Oxford and Cambridge boat race. It's kind of like a famous place, but it's a very, very old, beautiful place with kind of the old cobbled streets and the old buildings that date back hundreds of years. Big university town, so it's a real kind of trendy kind of place to go to. It's a lovely place. It really has got some great scenery there, so it's a nice place to be around.
Cool. So tell me, did you start out as a photographer, or do you have an alter ego? You're something else behind the scenes.
No, I never started out. Never intended to be a photographer either. I just kind of slipped into it because when people ask me this, I always sort of tell them the story about when I was growing up. I had an uncle. I think everybody's got that member of the family that's always got the camera in their hand and they're always shoving it in the family members' faces, and you kind of hate it at the time. But my Uncle Dave was always the family photographer. I never ever thought I'd get involved in it, and then I kind of like moved away from home. I was living in London. I was kind of working in a bit of a secret squirrel job, working for the government in London. And then the one time I did go back home. My uncle was there, and he was in the kitchen with his laptop, and he said, "Oh, Glyn, come and look at this here." And he showed me this piece of software where he removed red eye off a photo, and he sort of clicked it, and I was hooked. That was it from then. And the fact that he'd been taking photos for about 40 years and still getting red eye, I didn't say a word about that. But I kind of got hooked. I think I've got a bit of an addictive personality. I really liked it, and I just kind of just went with it, and that was it. And things have just kind of naturally moved on that way. And now, this is what I do. So feel very, very lucky. Love doing this. It's great fun. It's good fun doing stuff like this. You can't complain, can you? It's great.
Oh, it's amazing. I can't believe it's a job.
Hey.
But so what you're just self-employed. You're doing everything on your own. Is that right?
Yeah, there's the business that I have it's me mainly. My wife in the background doing all kind of like the bookkeeping and stuff like that, because that's what she used to be, a bookkeeper. And you may have heard, I'm sure you would have heard, if you haven't, you have been sleeping under a rock somewhere. Dave Clayton, he's my best friend and is also my assistant, and he's the guy that what he does behind the scenes helps me to kind of look better than I really am. He's a great guy, and he's a designer guy. He's just like a multi-talented kind of guy that you want to have around. He's great fun.
Oh gosh, I wish I had someone like that. Does he do the production of your videos, or do you do that?
No, do you know, that's kind of something that I do. I do. I mean, we talked earlier on about having little sleep. I do generally have just maybe 4 hours sleep a night sometimes. I'll do all this stuff. I'll do all the video editing myself. I just love doing that. It's not a chore. I actually do really enjoy it. And since we've had all the sort of creative cloud has thrown everything into the pot, I'm probably like you guys. I'm using much more than I ever thought I would do. I mean, today was the first day that I used Adobe Audition, and oh my God, absolutely superb, absolutely superb. So yeah, I do all that, and it's just part of what I do. So
that's really cool. I mean, it is interesting that those of us who used to say, oh, I'm a photographer, then we became photographers and teachers. Now we're photographers, teachers, and video professionals, and publishers and everything else in the world. It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but I can't. When you sort of say, if a layperson says to me, "What do you do?" it's easier to say I'm a photographer, because if you say you're a retoucher, it kind of draws all kinds of like, "What the heck is that?" And you have to explain it. You say, "Oh, I do airbrushing, Photoshop." "Oh, right, yeah, now I know what you mean. My brother's got that," and it doesn't seem so important. If you say that if you're a photographer, it kind of sounds better. But I suppose I'm kind of 50-50. Or 51-49, more Photoshop, I guess. I kind of fluff my way around the photography, really. Between us, don't tell anybody else. I kind of fluff my way around.
Well, that's really cool. And what are you doing when you come to the States? Have you been talking at conferences and stuff?
Yeah, I've been very lucky. I've been teaching at Photoshop World, which is something that was kind of like in my bucket list of things that I wanted to do. It's kind of weird, but my first one I taught there was the beginning. I think it was December 2012, Washington 2012, and I got the phone call from Scott Kelby completely out of the blue, and he kind of rang me up, because I'm grateful that we became kind of friends, just long distance friends over the time. He'd come to London, we'd hung out a few times, and then completely out of the blue he rang me, and I was in Oxford. I was having a coffee. I was in Costa. And phone rings. I didn't recognise the number, and he says, "Hi, Glyn, Scott." And I'm like, "Hi." And
that'll give you a heart attack.
Yeah, he said, "I'm just here having lunch with Calabria," and he said, "I just want to ask you a question." He said, "You're going to Photoshop World, right?" I went, "Yeah." He said, "Will you do me a favour?" He said, "Will you teach for us at Photoshop World?" And I was like, trying to be cool, but I went, I said, "Yeah, bear with me a second." And I put the phone to my chest, and I went, "Ow," beep, 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 beep. Yeah, no problem. I was like, oh my God, So yeah, that was what I discovered. I was bilingual then. I didn't realise I knew so many expletives. But I kind of, yeah, I'm now teaching a Photoshop world. I've been invited back. I'm back there again in April. Before then, I'm going up to the Netherlands. I'm doing some stuff over there with Frank Doorhoff. And then, later on, I'm doing something else. I've got a phone call today, actually, full enough. I've been invited to teach over in Fuerteventura for 10 days. Which is a big sort of like a community I never even knew about, this big photography training community. They've invited me to go and be one of the trainers over there for 10 days. So, hey, I'm going to get some sun. I've got to go. I want to go from blue to white, and then I can go down as well.
We can relate.
That's so wonderful. I'm so glad that's happening for you. It's really exciting, and you totally deserve it, because not only are your tutorials really educational and useful, but they're fun to watch, and I think that's really the secret. So much of this stuff is difficult and could be technically, just put you to sleep, right? And you do it in a fun way, so I appreciate that.
That's good to hear. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, and shortly you will come and entertain us with a fun bunch of tutorials. But before that, a couple of announcements, and maybe I'll do a short thing and show you something too. There are two big things this week. One is, I don't know if you guys noticed, that Adobe is back to offering Photoshop and Lightroom through Creative Cloud for only $9.99 a month. And yay! And I understand that's for anybody. Like, you don't have to have owned previous versions. So this is a great opportunity for everybody to jump on it. It's going to be it's the best deal ever. I'd go for it. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's out there. And as usual, they say it's a limited time offer. They tend to keep, redoing it, but it's still limited time, so get on it. So
it's a rolling limited time.
Right. That's thing number one. Thing number two, I'm so excited. I think I can say this on the air because the person involved has announced it online, and that is that John Knack, who has been working at Adobe for 14 years, holding amazing important positions, like I think he was principal or senior product manager for Photoshop for a long time, and then principal product manager for digital video and other things as well. He is moving from Adobe to, guess where? You could say it. Steal the thunder. Google, it's true. To Google's digital photography team. Oh my gosh, that is really exciting. At first I'm like, oh no, don't leave Adobe, but then I'm like, oh yay, do go to Google.
Now whenever we see John Knack, he'll be wearing Google Glass.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's happening. I'm sure we're going to find all new exciting things happening for photographers on Google after he gets settled in that job. So that's all happening. Now, what else? Oh, so and for me, nothing happens for a long time, and then everything happens, right, guys? That happens for you too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I am writing a classroom in a book all by myself about Photoshop and Lightroom.
Yeah.
That's pretty big, and it's, I miss writing. I haven't done it in a while, but I really enjoy writing, so I'm doing that. And then next week I go to the lynda.com studio to do a course about using Lightroom with Photoshop elements, which is something that maybe a lot of people aren't doing, but I get requests all the time when I teach live from folks who don't want to buy Photoshop. What else can they do? They need a pixel editor to go along with Lightroom, and one solution is to use Elements, which goes for as low as like $59 or something.
And Jen, invariably, when I do my stuff, I almost always have one or two students that are using Elements. And so this is one of the big questions is, can I use Lightroom with Elements? So
and
that's a great course.
Often free. If you buy it with like a printer or with your Wacom tablet, Elements is usually free, so that's why a lot of people have it and have access to it.
Yes, I think that will help people out. I already did a course on there about using Lightroom with Photoshop, and now this is Lightroom with Photoshop Elements, and that'll expand that bunch of information. So that's all happening for me this week. But right now, I'm very excited about what we're doing here. And so I thought I would just take this opportunity to do a short tutorial, just because I want to show off for Glyn. And also because I have not done one in so long on the show. I apologize, but I've been really busy. So I wanted to show you something that I think may come up for you, and that is what happens if you have your camera set to shoot not only RAW, which I hope most of you are shooting now, but also JPEG. Many digital SLRs can do that. You're shooting both at the same time. And it comes to mind that one example of a time when you might want to do that is what Gene was talking about, when you plan to make a quick slideshow. For example, you're shooting at a wedding and you want the bride to be able to quickly see, do a slideshow of everything, and you don't want to sit there correcting the RAW files. And RAW files don't always look great at first because they're just default interpretation of data into pixels. So anyway, you might want to have a bunch of JPEGs for that purpose, but not sacrifice having the RAW files to work with later. So you say you've done that, you've shot both, and then you're in Lightroom, and you no longer need the JPEGs anymore. The wedding is over, and they're just hogging space on your drive. What can you do? So that's what I wanted to show you real quick, the solution that I came up with to deal with that. And I already told those guys they can't make me look bad and say, no, that's wrong, there's a better way to do it. But you can, actually, if you know something. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, or try to. Can someone tell a joke while I do this?
I can't tell a joke.
I never remember them.
My music. All right, now let's see. Now you might see my screen. Do you?
It's about to happen. There's always that lag. There it is.
Yay. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom 5, and we are looking at a whole bunch of photos that I did not take. My partner John Lorenz shot these photos, and he never does what I say. He always does the opposite, right? Right, Erica? Are you guys there? Hello?
I'm here. I'm just always worried that there's going to be some sort of loud noise, so I always have my mic on mute.
Oh, okay, fine. Well, Erica probably knows guys never do what you say, and so John always does the opposite. And so I'm like, John, don't shoot RAW and JPEG. And he does anyway, right? And then he's so kind that he lets me import them into my Lightroom catalog and use them in tutorials and stuff. So I'm like, all right, here I have in this catalog both RAW files and JPEGs. And how do I know that? Well, for one thing, you can see, can you guys read above the thumbnails? Each thumbnail has the name of a file followed by RAF, which is the proprietary RAW format for the Fuji camera that he has, the I think it's X100, and then it says JPEG right after it. Can you read that? Hello, panel.
Well, I can't, but I turned my thing down, so.
I can read it.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
I've got it.
But most people could.
So that's how you would know if you were in that situation, that you had both kinds of files, and that they were both, Lightroom could see them, or at least recognize that both were there. But so at this point, I'm like, okay, I don't want those JPEGs anymore. I want to get rid of them off my hard drive. And I can't just go out to my hard drive and get rid of them because they're all intermingled by file name, in my operating system's file list. And it would take a long time to have to select each one individually, or all together, and by clicking on them. So here's what I'm going to do instead. First of all, by default, Lightroom does not treat the JPEGs separately from the RAWs, as you can see. So what I need to do is kind of tear them apart from inside of Lightroom. Well, where's the command for doing that? Anybody there know a command to do that? I don't.
No, I don't.
I don't either. So here is what I'm going to try to do instead. I'm going to go up to Lightroom's Preferences, and on the Mac that's under Lightroom, on the PC under Edit, and go down to Preferences and go to the General Preferences. And there is an option to treat JPEG files next to RAW files as separate photos. Well, that sounds like it might work, right? Let's try that. So I'm going to check that, and then I'll close the Preferences. Well, nothing happened yet. What I need to do now is basically import those JPEGs separately into the catalog. I could do that by using, just doing an import, or another way to do the same thing is to right-click the folder that contains all of these files in the Folders panel in Lightroom and choose Synchronize Folder. And in the Synchronize dialog box, I could leave Show Import Dialog before importing unchecked. I'm just going to leave it checked because I want you to see what's going on here. So then I'll click Synchronize. And that opens the big import window. With nothing in it. There we go. Okay, and now you can see in the import window, each photograph or each thumbnail has a neighbor. The neighbor is dimmed out. The neighbor is the raw file that's already in the catalog and therefore appears dimmed out in the import window because Lightroom doesn't want to have duplicates of what is already in there. But the JPEG of each photo is lit up, check-marked, and ready to be imported. So this is how I'm going to get these JPEGs to be in Lightroom as separate entities, is by going ahead and clicking import here, or if I had chosen not to show the import window, I would just let synchronize run. Same thing. So we click import, and now we see all the JPEGs coming in, and when we have previous import selected in the catalog panel, we see only the JPEGs in the library. But if I were to go back, as I probably would if I were working here, to the folder that contains all the photos, now I've got another kind of a mess, which is I've got each raw file and right next to it the corresponding JPEG. Well, great. I said what I wanted to do is get rid of all the JPEGs, and now I have to look at them all mixed in Lightroom. What would you do? Anybody ideas what to do now to just get my hands on the JPEGs here so I can delete them?
I would filter for just the JPEGs.
Yeah.
Right. Filter for the JPEGs. That would be one way. But you know, some people might even go down to the sort menu at the bottom of the library and sort by file type, and then at least, you know, you could get all the JPEGs in a pile here and all the raw files in a pile. But I like what Sean said because it's just nice and neat, and we'll be able to see just the JPEGs. If you press the / key on the keyboard, and that opens the filter bar at the top of the library, and from here I'll click on the metadata filter, which really is such a powerful filter that I fear that a lot of people don't use often enough. Mm-hmm. Now here in any one of these columns, I can click the title of the column and choose to have that column represent file types. And now I see in the file type column of the metadata filters that I have 48 JPEGs and 48 RAWs, and if I choose to see only the JPEGs by clicking on JPEG, there they are. Even if I make my thumbnails smaller by dragging the thumbnail slider in the toolbar to the left, all of these files are just JPEGs. Now I just select them all, Command A or Control A on the PC, and hit the delete or backspace key on the keyboard. And I'm going to actually delete these from my disk because I don't want them. Now if you're afraid to do that, what you could do instead of this is select them all and make a new folder and drag them into the new folder in the folders panel. You could do that. And then, you know, you could remove them from the catalog without deleting them from the disk. But I'm going to go ahead and choose delete from disk so they don't show up because I said I don't want them and I really don't. And now, don't be scared. I still have the raw files. When I go back to file type.
Where'd they go?
There they are. I go back and click on all file types, and there are the raw files. / again to close the filter. And now I have just the raw files. Yay!
One little tip there for you, Jan. When you have that original setup where you saw that the Raw+Jpeg was on your description for the file type because it was treating them as not separately. Yeah. If you want to get to the JPEG, you can always right-click on any RAW and say Show in Finder or Show in Explorer. And typically all your JPEGs will be right after your RAWs because they'll have the same beginning file name. Ooh, that's a good idea. But see, then, Gene, when you get out there to do it, I see two problems. Number one, as you say, every JPEG is right after the RAW. So you have, if you have thousands of photos, you're not going to pick them out one by one. So if you just want to get to one JPEG. No, I was saying I want to get rid of all the JPEGs. Yes, that would, yes. The other thing is, even if you were to delete the JPEGs from the operating system, I think, I haven't tried this, but I'm guessing that Lightroom would say, there's these missing files because you didn't tell Lightroom you deleted them. Haven't tried that. Oh yeah, I wasn't saying about deleting them. I was just picking up on the fact that if you were working in that workflow where you kept your JPEGs, but you didn't want them in the catalog, but you needed to get to a JPEG, you could just do the right click. That's absolutely true. Thank you for adding that. Okay, so I'm done, and now I have to figure out how to bring myself back into...
Oh. Yeah. I was going to say, Sean, that is the most realistic glove puppet I've ever seen in my life.
Let's see. Oh, there you go. Wow, look at that.
That is so realistic.
Well, you know, I didn't have any really good Photoshop tips to show tonight, so I figured I'd just show a cute dog.
Always a winner. It's always a winner.
Taking the easy way out.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I always say, cute always wins over creativity. So.
Boy, I do so well.
Well, look, you know, Glyn has been sitting there so patiently, and I know the many people who are watching the show are waiting to see him. So, Glyn,
I'm going to embarrass Glyn here a little bit because I'll tell a short story. Whenever I'm watching his stuff on my iPad, I have the volume down, and my wife says, "Why is Christopher Eccleston teaching Lightroom?"
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. I love your wife.
But then she looks over and sees you. But
and then you had to ruin it, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
that's really mean. He's cute. What do you mean? Listen, I have to tell you, Glyn, there's a certain generation where any guy from England, like immediately you had 9 or 10 points. Like you could be the grossest looking guy in the world. If you have an English accent, we love you. And you know why?
Why?
So the Beatles.
Oh, right, okay. I'm glad you said could have been the most grossest man in the world.
All right, take it over, Glyn. Wow us.
Right, so I'm going to do a screen share. This is what Ron taught me well, hopefully. Right, let's just go for a screen share, and I'll go for that one. Start screen share, and then I'll dive over to Photoshop. So can you guys let me know what you can see on the screen?
Right now it's still blank. There we go. I've got it.
Have you got Iron Man? Okay, all right. Well, the first thing I think I'll show. We'll start off nice and quick. This is a picture that I did. It was obviously it's a composite. It doesn't exist. Well, it does in my head, but not for real. This is a guy over in the UK who actually makes these suits. Believe it or not, he does them for the film premieres. And he's a car mechanic by trade, but he makes these things. This was what it's like originally, after I'd done a few little bits in it. But the one thing I want to show you, you probably noticed on the body armor, when I'd retouched this, because there was going to be all kinds of debris and dust and all that kind of stuff flying around, it didn't seem right that his body armor was going to be perfectly intact. So I needed to make it look as if it was dented. And you know, Photoshop being Photoshop, there are countless ways that we could do that. I mean, you could probably do like dodging and burning if you were really, really good at it to make it look and appear as if there was dents in it. Particularly this one here, just on the side of his chest here. But the technique that I actually used for this, I did do a video on my YouTube channel, and all it was doing was using finding on the internet, going to Google's photos, we mentioned already, and finding pictures of cars that already had dents in them. And you can use those original dents and put them into the picture to make it look as if like Iron Man was dented here. So that kind of got me thinking about another thing we could use that same technique for, and I used it on this picture here. Now I haven't applied it just yet, but this is a friend of mine called Steve Cook. I think he's number 2 now in the world at his body weight for kickboxing, and he's only about 5 foot nothing. But I would never ever tell him, you know, that he was small, because he's hard as nails, this guy. But what I wanted to show was how we can use the same technique now to give him more abdominals, because he assures me when he's in fight condition he's got good abs. So because this was a picture, and I wasn't going to dispute that because he's hard. So I wanted to sort of, when I retouched this picture for him, I wanted to give him abs like he told me he had. Okay, so the way we can do that is I'm going to go to the hard drive here, and I've got a picture of a friend of mine called Nigel. This is Nigel here. I mean, this guy is a genetic freak, lovely guy, and he's already got the abs. So, Gene, I borrowed this picture of yours, so I hope you don't mind. So what I'm going to do now, I can now get my lasso tool. I'm just going to make a very rough selection of Nigel's abdominals, like that. Then I'm just going to get my move tool, and I'm going to drag those over into this picture here. Obviously they're a little bit big at the moment, so we can just resize them, bring it down just a little bit, and just place them somewhere roughly where they should be. Now the only thing you have to be careful of when you do this is to kind of line up the navel. So let's just lower the opacity down just a bit, and we'll just line up something like that. and then that's it. Bring up the opacity a bit more. So maybe something like that's looking good, and I'll just press enter to set it into place, and we can always change that later on. So because we're going to be good, you know, nowadays we work non-destructively as much as we can. The next thing I'm going to do is go to filter, and I'm going to convert that layer for smart filters. Then I'm going to go to filter, other, and use the high pass. And I'll take it right down in a minute, something like that. And the great thing is now, what I can do is I can use this radius here to bring up, to decide how good his abs actually do look. All right, so I can bring it up. So that's probably about me now. I wish. Those days are long gone. So I can bring up the radius slider, keep bringing it up to across to around about here. So that's looking good, and then click OK and change the blend mode now to maybe something like overlay. So we can kind of like bring it in. So now I can turn it on and off, and we can give him abs. I can also maybe kind of mask it out a little bit, which is on his trousers. Get a brush, get a black brush, 100% opacity, and just paint it off this kind of area just around about here. So it's only going to be on his main abdominals. And the great thing is, because we're using smart objects, we can always double click on the high pass there to bring it up, to say, well, we don't want it quite so much, so we can bring it down, or we could even bring it up even more to show the abs off a little bit more as well. So that's just a quick one. I just wish that when you see, it actually looks better from the distance as well. They can see he's got his nice abs on. So you can mask out areas as well. So it's a really quick way of adding the abdominals in, and that's exactly what I did on the Iron Man. Just getting pictures of cars with dents on them, making a rough selection of the dent, dragging it on top of him, and doing exactly the same thing, using that high pass. And the great thing with the dents, you can actually decide how dented you want it to look by how far up you bring that radius slider. So that's just one of them. Obviously, you guys don't need the abs one anyway, so we'll just close that one down. So
Okay, I have a question.
Go for it.
This is a great technique, and it works great on the boxer, and it's cool with the dents. How do you think of situations in which you can use a technique like that? What goes through your mind to say, oh, a boxer, oh, Iron Man?
Obviously, it does depend what I would use that on. I mean, I do a lot of work with guys who are and girls who are physique athletes, and that's predominantly because that's what I used to do. I used to compete in bodybuilding, so I'm kind of naturally drawn to working with people who've got physique. So I'll always use it, but I've got to be honest with you, a lot of times that I have used it, that's probably one of the only times that I've really pushed it on bare skin. A lot of the times I'll tend to use it when they've got like a tight t-shirt on, just to make it sort of stand out more through their t-shirt. There was a picture I did, which I might show in a short while. It was a guy who's a rugby player, an English rugby guy, and he wasn't really in condition. But he had, I mean, the rugby guys now in the UK, they wear these really tight t-shirts because obviously they're playing professionally now. They're in much better shape than they used to be years ago, so they are looking quite muscular. But when I photographed him for this particular shot, he wasn't really in the best condition, and he was really paranoid about his teammates seeing the picture without him looking, you know, muscly. So I used that technique on, because he was like a three-quarter shot, and I used it to sort of add back muscles onto him as well, so it looked like his back was a bit more knobbly. It's very vain, all this physique stuff, isn't it? But people require it, so I will tend to use it. But the one on the Iron Man, Jan, that was just purely, came up with it just by playing around, but it was a technique that I just thought that just worked for me. It just worked best.
It would be a really good technique, I'm thinking, for aging paper or aging like boxes if you were doing something for composite.
Yeah, there was all kinds of stuff you could do with it. I know that when I kind of first started out, I did a couple of pictures where there was a guy who was punching the ground, and the ground had cracked, and I used a really kind of, a really basic technique to get a crack off the road, which I'd photographed with my phone, to then put into this picture. I think if I'd used this technique now, if I could like rewind time, I think this technique would probably work even better for it. But see, this is the great thing. This is what I love about Photoshop. You know, we get taught so many different techniques, but I've always kind of thought, I don't know what you guys think, but I've always thought that the skill in Photoshop and also Lightroom, it's not knowing lots and lots of techniques. The skill is knowing when to use them. Because, you know, crumbs, if everybody was, you know, if everyone kind of remembered and used all the techniques they saw in the magazines, everybody would be doing this for a living, and everybody would be producing just amazing pieces of work. But it's how to combine all the techniques together to get the final result. I don't know what you guys think.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
I think
totally agree. That's why I asked you that. What were you going to say, Gene? Sorry.
I was just saying it's also good to know as you get through this when to back off on some of these. I mean, I see a lot of people, they'll put these techniques and these effects on, and they just go way overboard, and then wonder why they don't get the same results that someone like you gets.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I was always told from the start. In fact, one of the best things advice I ever got, was to slow down, to just do a little bit and then go away and come back to it. Because I think nowadays, with so many places that we can share our pictures, you know, like the revamped Flickr, we've got 500px, and all these other, you know, great places that show your pictures off really, really well. There can be a tendency, once you've done a photo shoot, to just rush your way through it and get it online. But, you know, once you've got it online, it's been seen and that's it. And if you notice something you didn't like, it's like, do you know what I mean? You've kind of like done too soon. And I did that before with a picture of I did of a guy, it was a soldier, and he was like an Afghan kind of scene where he's walking away along this dirt track, and I'd photographed him with 2 rim lights. And I'd originally started the photo shoot as a 3/4 length shot, so it worked great because you didn't see the floor. So I worked on that, but because I generally do get very excited when I'm doing all this kind of stuff. I really do get into it. So I thought, hey, why don't we do some full length shots? So I've kind of like moved back, and I'm taking pictures of him at full length, not thinking to turn one of the rim lights off. So when it came to doing the retouching, I was completely blind to the fact that I had shadows, 2 lots of shadows crossing each other on the floor. So I've retouched the picture, composite, and I put it online, and I was getting loads of great feedback, as you do on Flickr, and loads of people hugging you and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, one person says, "How many suns were there in your picture?" And I'm like, what does he mean? I think, oh no.
Just tell them it's sci-fi. You're on Tatooine or something.
Yeah. It's not real. It's not meant to be, but it was. It was meant to look real. So I couldn't even pull that one. I couldn't even say, yeah, I know. So I had to kind of then, you know, use a technique to get rid of the shadow. But it had already been posted online, so I can't remove that one now. But in my portfolio, the one that I would want to have done, had I not rushed, is in there. But hey, that's just the way you go. But yeah, best advice I was ever given was to slow down.
What else you got?
Okay, so let's just close this one down. I've got a really simple one here. That's Nigel. Really simple one here. This was again, it's just a composite. This is one I did when I was doing a workshop over in Germany. And this guy, he travels the world basically doing. He's a double for Johnny Depp, and he's generally, whenever you see Johnny Depp coming out the front of the sort of cinema, it's generally this guy. Johnny Depp scarpered off in a car at the back. So this guy's, you know, he's a bit of a stuntman. But the only thing I was going to show you, I've got a real thing about. There was a couple of things in Photoshop that I've got a real kind of fetish over. One of them is selections. I love working out ways to do selections. And another one is lighting effects. And I've got a couple of lighting effects which I want to show you tonight. And this is just a really, really simple one. Because like I say, this is a composite. I wanted this to look as if he had this kind of, you know, the really olden days when they had those torches, when they put the flames, and they were kind of like on metal rings, and it was shining down. That's the effect that I wanted to create here. And it's a really, really simple one, and it's a technique that I've used many, many times. And maybe you guys have, you know, used this one as well. I just want to quickly show you how you do it. Let's just cancel that. To add this kind of light source, I'm going to go to Layer, New Fill Layer, and Gradient. I won't bother calling it a name because I can be lazy. Gradient comes up, and when we've got the gradient fill box here, we can click on the gradient itself and choose another gradient from within the gradient editor. It doesn't really matter which one we choose because we can always edit it by these little points here. But to start me off on a good footing, I'm going to go for this one here. So it's already looking quite nice. But what I also want to do is just change this purple to a coolish kind of blue. So go down here. Because what my Johnny Depp, Captain Jack Sparrow, he's in this kind of cave here where the lights can be nice and warm on one side, but as it goes further into the cave and further past him, it's going to go cooler. So let's just drag that down to something like that, and we'll click OK there. And then I can use this angle here to decide what kind of direction I want the light source coming in from. So I'm going to say something like that, and then click OK. Doesn't look realistic at the minute, but I then come over and change the blend mode. I love blend modes, like I guess we all do, and then click on soft light. So it kind of gets you somewhere near there, but if you want to finesse it, we can just double click on it, move this out of the way, and then bring your cursor on top of your picture. Let's just turn these little notifications off. Who hates Mavericks? Because I do. Let's just go up to there and turn those off. There we go. So now that I'm actually got the gradient fill box up here, I can bring my cursor into my picture, and then in real time I can click and drag the light source to where I want it to be. So something like that. Click OK. I could even lower the opacity down and actually use the fill. So you can go from making something looking okay, pretty flat, to a very, very quick, editable way of adding in a light source. And I tend to do that a lot. There's a picture I did of a guy who was, you've heard of the program Mad Men, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this guy was wearing a trilby hat and he's smoking a cigar, and I've put like a brick wall behind him, but I wanted it to appear as if he had a street light above him, exactly the same technique. And going back to what we said earlier on about being a photographer, that's when the photography comes in, because none of this would make sense if he didn't already have highlights on him as well. So there's no point doing all these effects if you haven't actually got the lighting correct as well. So I quite like that one. I tend to use that one quite a lot. I take it you guys have seen that one before, or?
I've seen the gradient, but that dragging inside of the image is a good tip. I didn't realize you could do that.
All right, cool. Okay, yeah, it's nice to be able to see it in real time, isn't it, rather than just sort of like having to keep guessing and clicking and whatever. So I quite like that one. All right, okay, so moving on then, let's just get rid of Captain Jack. And I want to show you this thing here. Now, I'm not, and probably never will be, a landscape photographer. Okay, that is a skill way beyond me, and I can just about take pictures that work for my backgrounds, but when it comes to taking landscapes, it's a big no-no for me. But I do like kind of taking them to play around and experiment with lighting effects. And like I said to you, one of the things I really like in Photoshop is selections, lighting effects, and in particular shadows. Because the original shot here, this is actually one I took this morning, and it was absolutely freezing when I took it. But this is just like an old barn, and I wanted to try and make it look as if it was a different time of day. But you know, although we can make all these different color effects and changes, particularly in Lightroom now, you guys can, who are really, really specialised in Lightroom, can do amazing things by changing the colouring and stuff. But regardless of the colouring, you've still got to have shadows to kind of give it that added effect. So I want to just quickly show you how I do this. And this is a tutorial that I'm actually going to be having in my weekly podcast, which goes out every Wednesday now. That goes out tomorrow. What should I say today over here? It goes out tomorrow. But I want to give you guys a preview of it anyway, of how I would do this shadow. So rather than doing it on this one, because there's a few little intricate things on that picture there, what we'll do is we'll go to this picture here, just to show you it closer up, to give you an idea of how you do it. So when I'm going to change the colouring in a picture, maybe give it like a bit of a feeling of having a sunset, one thing I'll always do is add the shadow at the very, very start, because we want that shadow to take on the colouring effect that we add in later on. I think if I add it at the very, very end, if I add the shadows at the end, it just isn't going to fit right. And like everything in retouching, it's always those small things that make the big difference. So for me, when it comes to doing the shadows, I'll always do them at the start. And I'm just going to use something like a levels adjustment to do that. Now, you might think, not you in particular, but generally, people might think that to darken it down, well, we could just simply just grab maybe something like the mid-tone slider and drag that across to the right-hand side. And yeah, sure enough, it darkens the image down, but there is a side effect to it. Because if I now zoom in, and if I just turn, if I can hold down this little button here and just press it off and on, you can see that although the picture's darkened, which is kind of like the start of me wanting to create this shadow, the side effect of what I don't want here is that by using the mid-tone slider, it's also increased the saturation in the brickwork and in the grass. And you can see that, like I say, when I turn it on and off. So using that particular method isn't going to work for me. So let's just reset it. And I'll just double click on the hand tool to go back a bit and just zoom out a bit. So what I'm going to do to darken this down to create a realistic kind of shadow is actually use the gradient underneath here. We've got the black and the white points with the out point levels. So I'm going to drag the white point and drag that in towards the middle. So now we can see that the picture does in fact start to darken down, but there is no change in like the saturation. It's more of a natural, pleasing and realistic kind of look to it. So I can bring it down so far. And obviously I don't have to get it spot on right now. I can always come back and change it because we're using an adjustment layer. So it's always, again, working this non-destructive way. So now that I've done that, obviously the whole picture's darkened down, which I don't want. I want to invert it first of all. We've got our keyboard shortcuts, Command or Control I, or we can just go to Image, Adjustments, and Invert. Then I'm going to get a brush, and I'm going to make sure that the brush is actually a hard, 100% hardness on the brush. And I'm going to paint in white, so my foreground colour is white. And let's just zoom in. So I'm going to imagine that the light source that we're going to add in later on is going to be on the horizon, just on the kind of like, you know, where we've got the line of the building, it's just at the back of there. So it's going to be hitting this wall, and the shadow is going to be coming straight down, or maybe just off at a little bit of an angle. So the first thing I'll do then, with this brush at 100% opacity, I'm going to put a little dab just there. And let's just make sure there's no settings on this brush. Let's turn off the shapes. There we go. So a little dab at the bottom. I'm going to hold down my Shift key, and I'm going to think that maybe the shadow is going to go off just slightly at an angle. So now I'm going to hold down my Shift key and click. And that's going to give me a nice straight line. It saves me trying to be really accurate. So I can just do it nice and quick like that. So we'll zoom out. And now that I've kind of like defined where that shadow is going to be, I can be really sloppy and just come in really quick and paint it over this part of the wall. So we'll just cover that in, like so. And I will go really quickly here. I might go over the edges of the bricks just a little bit, because I don't want you sitting there twiddling your thumbs while I'm trying to get really accurate. So let's just go across to here and into there. In fact, let's just, typical Virgo, I've got to do it properly. Here we go. Let's just do that. Tidy that just a little bit. So you get the idea that we don't want to have it anywhere other than on that wall there. Oops. Right, so that kind of would work now. You can see if I turn that on and off, it's a fairly pleasing effect so far. And having this hard line here, to some degree, that could probably work if we weren't doing this on grass. If this was on a concrete floor, a road or whatever, the line would be pretty much straight like that. But this is grass. So how do we create the effect that the actual shadow is hitting grass? Well, there's a couple of things we can do. I'm going to get a brush again. And the great thing is we don't need to go and install any special brushes or anything like that. We can use ones that are in their default when we first get Photoshop. So I'm going to come over to here, drop down, and if I remember rightly, it's number 134. That's like 3 blades of grass. So I'm going to click on that. Then I'm going to go to my brush presets here, and I'm just going to change some settings. So we can see in the bottom the preview of what the brush is going to look like. First thing I'm going to do is just change the angle of it. I don't want it to be completely upright. I need it to just be angled off slightly, because I'm going to paint down this line here that we've got. So we'll angle it off just a little bit. Shape dynamics, I don't really want to bother with that, so I'll turn that off. Scattering, I'll keep the scattering. Definitely don't want color dynamics, don't need that. And transfer, no, we won't bother with that. But what I will do is just increase the spacing a little bit. So now then, I'm going to come out of here and come to this line, and you can see the shape that we've got, which is this one here. I'm going to decrease the size of it with my brush, left bracket key, I apologise, and what I'll do is I'm going to paint down here. So as I paint down, I'm going to occasionally increase and decrease the size of the brush, just painting down like this.
And you're painting on the mask, right?
I'm painting on the mask, yeah, because what we originally had was a very, very straight line, which we don't want. And all we're looking to do here, you probably heard Joel Grimes say it, it's sell the fake. All right, so now the effect that we've done there, if I just hold down my Alt or Option key and click on the layer mask, you can see what that's actually done. So rather than having a dead straight line, it's given me this kind of fake blade of grass effect. So now that shadow is actually looking like it's hitting the grass. So that's one thing you can do, but you can take it another step. But first, before we do that, I'm just going to maybe just very, very quickly just change the colouring. Lots of ways we can do it. I'm going to go to something like a selective colour. By default, when we open that up, it says reds, but we'll just change it to neutrals, and we'll just play around with some of the sliders here just to warm it up a little bit. I'm just going to really rush through adding in the colouring, just something like this. We could even maybe go to a photo filter, choose something like 81 and bring the density up, something like that, just to sort of give it a little bit of warmth. So what I want to do now then is do something with this grass here, because the shadow's looking all right, but you know, this is the thing. When I did a video today all about this, and on there I said one tip. If I was asked to sort of state one tip that would help people with retouching, that tip would be to just get out and observe. Just look around you. Especially, I mean, today we actually did have some sunlight, and it's a case of, right, just get out with your camera or your mobile phone and take pictures of things that are around you. Not because you want to take a great picture, but because you want reference pictures. So take pictures of shadows, take pictures of reflections, take pictures of all kinds of things, because, I mean, you guys, you know, you do compositing. How many times have you had people ask you, how do you draw a shadow? What does it look like? How do you do this? How do you do that? I think if only you'd taken the time to actually study what really does happen with shadows and light, I think it can make your retouching a whole lot easier. I mentioned in the video today about a friend of mine, Aaron Blaze, who's he used to work for Disney. He does amazing drawings of elephants and lions and all that kind of stuff. But whenever he's doing a drawing, he doesn't just draw it by memory. He always has reference pictures with him. And that's what I'll always suggest to people. Get out, take reference pictures, and then you'll be able to see what needs to be done, how to paint in shadows, and all the little things that make the big difference. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So what I'm going to do now, just a little thing, and this, again, it's only a small thing, but on this area of grass here, I'm going to give it a little bit more impact, because if we had a sunset, that light would be skipping over this grass, and it would make that grass really quite stand out. It would be a lot sharper, and a lot clearer and more defined. So we can kind of fake that. So, in fact, no, before we do that, let me just jump back. See, I do this. I do jump around quite a bit. Right, this layer mask here. Oops, yeah, the layer mask here with all the grass on. One little thing mentioning about doing observing. When you have a shadow, wherever it hits the building, the shadow is always very defined and sharp. But the further away the shadow becomes, it gets softer and softer and softer. So what we can do is get something like the blur tool, which you find in amongst the sharpen and smudge tool. Let's put the strength up to 100, and what I would do with that is just increase it, and at the bottom here, I'd paint a couple of strokes with the 100, then I'd change the strength of it to maybe something like 60, go further up and paint a little bit with that, change it to maybe something like 30, and a little bit something like that. So at the top, it's nice and sharp, and as we go further down, it gets softer and softer and softer. So that's just one little thing. Okay, so getting back then, just quickly, let's talk this little thing we said about the grass here. What I'm going to do, again, being a good boy and being working non-destructively, I'm going to shift-click so that all my layers are selected here, and go to the flyout menu at the top of the layers panel and convert to smart objects. And Photoshop will do a little bit of thinking. Hopefully, it won't take too long. And what it's going to do is put all these layers there into a smart object, which is like those Russian dolls that you get when you put one inside the other, inside the other, inside the other. The layers are still there, but they're neatly packed away, which for a Virgo is very, very appealing. So now we're going to go to Filter, and we're going to go to Camera Raw. And this is the great thing. I remember watching a previous episode, Jan, when you had Jack Davis on, and I think it was probably when Camera Raw had just been given out as an available filter, and you said to Jack that at the time you were kind of like intrigued as to why we would want it. I'm guessing that's probably changed now, to be honest with you, your attitude or your thoughts of why it is, because I mean, one of the biggest things for me with the updates with Creative Cloud, and it has been getting Camera Raw as a filter, because now what we can have is access to everything within here at any point during the retouch, and that is a godsend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my adjustment brush, and I'm going to make sure all the sliders are at 0 here, apart from clarity I'm going to bring up, and sharpness I'm going to bring up, and I'm going to click on the show mask at the bottom, and all I'm going to do is just paint over. Let's just hold on. What's it playing? That's something's happened here. There we go. Just paint over the grass like so. Obviously, if I go too far over, I'll just click on erase, and we'll just paint it off this little bit of grass in shadow, because that grass there is going to be very, very dull, no sharpness to it whatsoever, because it's in shadow. Let's just turn off the mask, and then all I'll do, you might not see it on the screen, but this is certainly one that, if you do it on your own pictures, you'll definitely see the difference. Increase the sharpness here, and what that's going to do is that's going to make that grass just stand out just that much, much more, so that, you know, it's got that kind of feel as if the light is skipping across it from behind. So hopefully you can see that, but if not, take my word for it. I wouldn't lie to you. It's making that grass just that little bit sharper, like it would be in real life if that light was skipping across it. So to finish off,
oh, sorry. I was going to say, would you ever worry about the tufts of grass that are standing up taller and do any dark shadow underneath those?
Yeah, you could come in with, I mean, this picture here, I wouldn't really use this one because this kind of grass here wouldn't suit, but you could actually use that three-pronged blade of grass brush head that we have there to paint some in underneath here. Or you could do, there's also a single blade that you could actually do, but I think something this close, I wouldn't want to do it, to be honest with you, because it wouldn't look that good. But this is just roughly to show you how you can do that effect, which I did on that final picture that you saw with the barn, where it was all kind of a little bit more into it.
It's wonderful. It's helped me a lot.
Oh, good. The next thing I'll do here is I'm going to use the temperature just to give it a bit more warmth, and we'll just get a gradient, sorry, radial gradient here, and just a radial filter. Don't want any clarity, but I'll just give it a little bit of a vignette to take the sharpening out, and just bring that down as well. Just going very, very quick. Click OK. And again, this is just to show you the kind of process that you can go through to add in shadows. I've got a real fetish about shadows, as you've probably gathered, because they can completely transform a location. They really can.
Hey, Glyn, is this the picture you were doing a composite on with the two soldiers earlier today?
Actually, yeah, you're right, mate. This is one. This actual, I don't know what they call these. This is a World War II kind of bunker, I suppose, where they would have been in. Two guys would have been in. So I've got one guy in the composite. He was sat here. I had the camera on a tripod, and I've taken a photo of him there. We had a little crisp packet, and then he's moved across to the other side of the crisp packet and changed his position and changed his hat, so it looked like two people. But yeah, I'm kind of working on that. That's a work in progress because my original thoughts have kind of changed, but it's a personal project, so there's no kind of rush there.
Oh, that was the same guy. I didn't even realize that looking
Yeah,
at it.
do you know what? I actually posted, I said, great photo shoot today with Barry and his twin brother Barry. And one guy just commented going, huh, how funny, his mom named them both Barry. I'm like, well, no, it was a really bad attempt at a joke, but hey, there you go. The last thing, let's just add a very, very quick blank layer. Let's just try and make a down and dirty sunset of the sunlight. So I've got a blank layer. I'm going to get a brush. I'm not going to use the blade of grass brush this time. I'll just use a nice soft edge brush. We can make it fairly big. Go to my foreground colour, and I'm going to choose a kind of nice orangey yellow kind of colour. Something around about that there would be fine. Yeah, we'll go for there. Click OK, and then I'll increase the brush size, and I'll just dab. Let's make sure we've got no settings in there. That's one thing I always forget. Shape dynamics, and we'll put a little dab on there. It doesn't look realistic at the minute, but we come over, and my favourite of all blend modes is colour dodge. We'll use colour dodge, and then that can be used to kind of just add in just that little bit of sunlight coming through, and we can then use our move tool to reposition it where we want. But what I really like about that is how a little bit of that light would skip around onto the wall, and you can turn that on and off and see how it just skips onto the wall. But another great thing is we've got these blades of grass here that have got that almost blown out white in them anyway, but when we add this colour dodge layer over the top, it blows them out even more, which adds to the kind of realistic effect, if you like, of what sunlight would do. So that's just, I mean, that's just like a... I've gotten a round of applause. Oh, away with you. So that's just a very, very quick run through of you know, it's not the best picture to show it on, but it kind of shows it up nice and close. And that's the kind of things that I did on this picture here, just to change it from a very cold day to make it look as if it is in San Diego, and we've got this nice heat going on. But yeah, I mean, just one little thing about that as well, which one thing I mentioned on the video for tomorrow, was the fact that you'll notice for this particular shot, I was waiting for ages when it wasn't raining, but the clouds were filling the sky, so that we get no obvious shadows on the ground. And that's one thing I'll always say, if ever you're going to be taking photos for composites, try and get out on a day when it's, you know, a cloud-covered sky, so that you can then decide where the clouds are going to, so where the shadows are going to be later on, rather than like Mother Nature dictating to you how your picture must look. You can decide later on, and that makes the photography side of your models in the studio easier, because you then haven't got to think, well, I've got to photograph them with this particular light source because that's what the shadows are like in my background. Take it when there aren't any shadows, and then the world's your oyster.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't do much with composites myself. I mean, I do, but I don't do a lot. But I do a lot of landscapes and do a lot of fine art interpretation, and just that color dodge technique, I just saw it save me hours of work, of hand painting. I mean, great tip. It's amazing how much, you know, you think you get to a certain point, you think you know enough about what you're doing, and then somebody just changes everything for you. So that was one for me.
But this is what I love about Photoshop, Ron, is that you never ever stop learning, or at least you never should stop learning. Do you know what I mean? I could go and sit in on one of your classes, and if you told me one thing that I didn't know or I didn't think about, that would make the trip over completely worth it. I could go to Photoshop World, and although I'm teaching out there, I'll sit in classes, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's made it all worthwhile.
Oh, completely. I mean, one thing we've learned doing this show is that this just continuously happens, not just for us, but the panelists and the guests and people in the chat all have these aha moments when something that might seem very simple to the person doing the instructing is revolutionary to the person watching.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, I had somebody, I think I posted I did a video last week, and you know that little thing where you can you put a little paintbrush dab, and then you hold a shift key and click some distance away, and it creates a straight line. Out of the whole technique, the whole video, this one guy commented saying, "You've made my day. I never knew you could do that with a shift key and a brush stroke." I'm thinking, yeah, what about the technique? You know, I mean, I spent ages doing that. But that's one thing really made it for him. But that's the way it is, isn't it? It can be something really simple, or something that we take for granted, because we're always diving into Photoshop and doing things really quickly without giving it a thought. But for somebody else, it can be a game changer, a complete game changer. I mean, that color dodge, Ron, that was exactly how I did the glowing light on his body armor here. Yeah. Exactly the same thing, and it just works. It's my favorite blend mode. I love it. It's so adaptable and got so many uses for it. I love it.
Yeah,
fantastic. Fantastic. What about you, Sean? You do a lot of compositing. Do you use some of these techniques too?
Yeah, definitely. And I have to say that I totally agree with what Glyn said about if you're out photographing for a composite, you know, photograph on an overcast day or an open shade, because you can always, as he said, you can always add shadows in far easier than you can remove shadows that are already in the shot. So overcast lighting is my favorite for shooting elements that I'm going to be using in composite. It's just so much more flexible and easy to work with.
Now, Glyn, when you talked about setting up the shoot in front of the bunker, so that doesn't sound like spontaneous shooting. It sounds like you had kind of planned out something in advance. Is that your general approach?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's that's something I have always done. I always like to plan and prepare and get the most of my time. And that goes back to when I first started. That, you know, when we're working Monday to Friday, we've got a full-time job and we've got a weekend and we want to get out shooting, but then we've got our partners to think about, that we can't then go and disappear away for the weekend. We've got to spend some time with them as well. You know, we've got to make what time we do have shooting, we've got to make it count. So when I first started, that wasn't the case for me. I'd get really excited about booking a photo shoot, and I'd think I'd planned it, but I'd get there and I'd work with a model who kind of expected me to tell them how to pose. And after about 5 minutes, we'd just run out of ideas, and I'd booked a studio for 4 hours, and I had to pay for 4 hours. So this kind of like pointless exercise that I had, where I was coming away feeling very deflated, the way I turned it around was thinking, right, I'm going to treat every single shoot I do, even if it's not a paid shoot, every personal project that I do, and I do a lot of those because I think that's the only thing that's really made me grow is by forcing myself to do personal projects. I treat those as if they're commissioned shoots. So I'll book a time in the diary, I'll source locations, I'll source props, I'll get the right model, I'll go on to places like Imp Awards and Apple movie trailers to get ideas and inspirations for pictures, and I'll plan it, and when the day comes, I know exactly what I'm going to be doing, and so does the model, and it just works.
Glyn, do you find yourself also going around and collecting different backgrounds, just like you would collect textures for some other composite down the road?
Yeah, I do, mate. Yeah, I definitely do that, and I'd recommend everybody do that because it doesn't cost us a penny, does it, to collect them? Right. I used to use stock websites like iStock and stuff like that, but the popularity of using stock photography has just grown incredibly, and unfortunately so has the price. So I would end up getting what I thought would be a perfect background. I'd pay for it, and I'd then put it into my picture, and it didn't work. And I'd kind of wasted, what would end up being like £20 now. It's like, my God, I can't keep doing this. So now that I've plan and prepare it, I generally kind of know what I want to get the background. I don't go out purposely thinking, today I'm going to go and photograph backgrounds. I generally kind of capture elements, if you like, backgrounds and textures and stuff when I'm out doing a shoot anyway. I'll kind of get the best of both worlds and 2 bites of the cherry by actually doing the photo shoot and getting extra bits as well.
And you mentioned quickly, I couldn't really understand what you said, some places you go for inspiration for ideas.
Oh, right,
yeah. Mind sharing?
There's let's just write it down. There's a website which I absolutely love. I'll give you a bit of I'll write it down because it'll be easier. Let's put it onto pixels here. Okay.
Isn't it amazing? You can use Photoshop like Word also, right?
Let's just wait that to open. I'll get DT and bring that down a bit. It's a website called, my God, that's big, Imp Awards, which is IMP Awards. Let's just bring that across, .com. So impawards.com. And what that is, I use that site all the time. It's basically a site that has, my God, any movie. Think of a movie. I guarantee that the movie art, the posters that they created for it, they'll all be there for it. So you'll have pictures from movies of past, present, and future. And they don't just show one poster, they show all kinds of different posters that were created for it. And although I look at that, I don't do it in order to completely copy the picture, but I'll look at them and think, I like the way they've done this, I like the way they've done that, and I collect those as references again, going back to what we talked about a short while ago about getting reference pictures. And I'll store them and I'll keep them and I'll think, how did they do that? In fact, that would look good there. And I'll try and replicate it. But without having those reference points, I wouldn't maybe think about it. So it's a great way of doing it. And I watch a lot of movie trailers as well, like the Apple movies. You've got Apple movie trailers, which is a great one. YouTube as well. They've got loads of footage on there for movie trailers. And I watch a lot of those because it gives me an idea of colouring and all that kind of stuff to give pictures a certain look.
Yeah, some of this reminds me, we had John Paul Caponegro on the show a couple of times, and one thing that he really advocates is keeping a pad around and drawing his ideas and writing his ideas.
Yeah.
And that helps them actually come to fruition, even when he's not thinking. Like you say, you bring your camera, you're not necessarily going out to shoot a sunrise or a bunch of clouds, but because you're aware of the projects you have on the go, the assignments that you've self-assigned, you're able to be productive even when you're being leisure.
Totally agree with you. I've got a Moleskine, a little black sort of A5 sized book, which I keep a couple of pencils with as well. I mean, I've got an iPad, but I always tend to find that I'm quicker to write it down and draw it in there than I am on my iPad. So that's with me all the time, because my brain, it kind of worries me sometimes. I come up with ideas at the most bizarre times, and I'll just sketch them down. And I mean, I could open that little book now, and there will be about maybe a dozen or so pictures that I've badly drawn that'll give me an idea of things that I want to do. I mean, I'm working on some projects at the minute involving wildlife, elephants, and stuff like that. And I've thought of things. If I don't draw them, I won't get them done. I'll forget about them. And now it's exciting, because I look through that little book and I think, God, I've got so many personal projects to work on, and that just excites the hell out of me.
It strikes me that you are not just a photographer, of course. You're also an artist, a designer, and that there are elements of things you might learn in art school as a painter, for example, like about shadows and about light. And you know, it really involves way more than what we think of as traditional photography. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you say the word artist, Jan, but I kind of struggle with that word for me.
Everyone does. Everyone does.
I kind of feel that, well, I just do what I do, and sometimes you feel like you kind of fluff your way through it. But, you know, all I do is I will look at what is there, what I actually see with my own eyes, and I'll take a picture of it. I mean, the prime example was I did the picture of the girls, friend of mine's daughters. I created that picture of them when they were like looking into or stood by a wardrobe with the light on. And it's kind of inspired by the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe film that I loved as a kid, and I wanted to do something like that. But I didn't know how the shadow would look hitting the wardrobe, which I would then draw in later. So all I did was I took a picture of, I got a little mag light, and I shone it onto the wardrobe, because this was all miniature stuff, and I took a picture of it with the shadow, and then I knew how to draw it in. So, you know, it wasn't clever. It wasn't me being like this kind of like amazing artist. I'm just copying what I saw. But if I hadn't taken that picture and had a reference, I wouldn't have the clue where to start. So it's easy. It kind of makes me look cleverer than I am, I guess. It's just you've got to have reference points.
Right. Well, I don't think you give yourself enough credit. I've seen many people who call themselves painters. That's what they do in their, what's it called, plein air painting, where you're standing in front of the scene and painting what you see. So you're painting with pixels what you see.
Don't forget to add magician too.
Yes.
I mean, isn't that like a shoebox, that room?
Yeah, that was it was literally a little sort of a cardboard box that I went online. Then I was looking at a doll's house shop, and the floor is paper. It's like a paper print of flooring. The wallpaper's a roll of paper, a little A4 roll of paper, and the wardrobe's about as big as my hand. And the toys are the girls' original toys that I put into there as well. And the great thing is they've now got this. It's on the way to them being printed, and it's about 4.5 foot wide on metal, and it just looks absolutely. I just love it. I really love it. I'm big time into getting things printed. It's just amazing. I love it.
Yeah, that's a good thing you mentioned, Glyn. A lot of people have forgotten that there's something different about a piece when you're done, or even just a regular photograph. If you can hold it in your hand tangibly.
Yeah. It's completely different, isn't it? I mean, you guys know that if you, I presume, you know, I'm guessing here you've all got your iPads and stuff like that. You'll have your pictures on it, and then you might show somebody your portfolio on an iPad, and the very nature of what they are, people flick from one picture to the next, and they go, oh, that's nice, flick. Well, that's quite, I like that one, flick. But when you give them a print, it's a totally different experience. They kind of like hold it at arm's length looking at it. They bring it closer. They move it around to the light. They kind of walk around going, oh, I like that, look at this. They spend so much time, more time, taking the picture in, and it has so much more impact. I love digital. I've been brought up on using digital, but you cannot beat print. You really can't.
No, I completely agree with you. Part of my my business model as I move forward as a photographer is to make sure that my clients are getting something in their hands that they just don't get anymore.
Yeah.
It's really important today because we are all digital.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Cool stuff. Shall I unshare my screen? Shall I come back to you guys?
Please, yes.
Let's. I'm still dressed. Don't worry. Click. Right. Can you guys see me now?
Almost.
Yeah, we
Yes.
can. This is the one platform where, like Alan Shapiro would say, pants are optional.
Yeah, you can only see
don't
me
stand
from
up.
waist upwards, can't you?
Yeah.
I don't want to think of you guys sitting there.
Dan, it's not a pretty picture because it's cold over here, all right?
Yeah, it's cold here too.
Oh, it's really cold here.
Oh, dear.
You guys are funny. All right, well, look, I wish we could talk more because I know we would have real fun, but it's been so much fun already. And I'm telling you, Glyn, I'm in awe of you. I need to learn from you a lot. And, you know, at the end of every show, I think, and sometimes I say, that's the best show we've done. Out of all 51 shows, that's the best one. But really, I'm thinking
That's
this is
the
the best show.
I'll second that, and I've been on one.
So thank you. Now, before we go, and we do have to go because we don't want to we want people to be able to go off and have their dinners and not get too sleepy and watch the whole show. So, anybody have anything else important to tell? Things you're doing? I don't know. Things you've read? Something.
I'll just jump in quickly if you don't mind. It's just I mentioned it during the show there. I've got a weekly podcast and YouTube show that goes out every Wednesday. So that's just something for people to look at. It's completely free. Tips and tricks and techniques that I post every week. And also on my website, we've got tutorials that people can download. And I think I'll probably send you a message with a code that people can get, I don't know, maybe 50% off or something like that as well. So
That'd be cool. And how do you get the website and where do you get the podcast?
it's well, if you go to glyndewis.com, everything's on there. So the YouTube channel, it's dead easy, youtube.com/Glyn Dewis, but all the links are there. But if people prefer to watch it on their iPads and iPhones and download it, they can also go to the iTunes podcast store as well.
So you're really an institution unto yourself. You're everywhere.
God,
well, I'll just put in there before we sign off and say goodbye is I've developed a certain proficiency in Photoshop. I wouldn't say that I'm as nearly as advanced as anybody else in the room, but I've developed a proficiency. When you get to a certain level, it's you guys and you, Glyn, that I look to when I need to learn something to teach someone else. So I just wanted to put that out there that you're really a teacher of teachers. So I thank you for what you do for us.
Thank you. But the same comes back, guys. I looked at each and every single one of you. Every one of you, I'd known about you way before you'd known about me. So I've kind of learned from you all the time.
It's just because we're so old.
He was being diplomatic.
All right, then. Anything from you, Sean or Eugene, to add?
No, I'm still amazed.
I'm gonna be heading out and going on eBay looking for my Iron Man suit next, and that's what I'll be wearing next time.
You may need it in Iceland. I hear it's very, very bad weather there, right?
Yeah,
Get a little one for the dog too.
We'll make the best of it. Yeah, and the dog, Iron Dog.
And I just want to say, aside from the time zone difference, if anyone's watching doesn't know this is, what is it, like 3:30 in the morning for you, Glyn?
Yeah, it's just 3:25 in the morning. Yeah.
So we want to have you back on the show, but maybe when you do the American tour, then you can come join us in a regular time. But you're welcome back anytime. I mean,
if you think you can put up with me again, I'll be more than happy. And this is easy. I can always catch up on sleep. It's good fun.
Okay,
I'm wide awake now.
We're happy to hear that because we'll definitely have you back.
Cool. Thank you very much.
And all of you, that goes for everybody down there. You're all amazing, and thank you for coming. And everybody out there in Google Plus land and YouTube land, thank you for watching. And we'll see you in 2 weeks for another episode of the Photoshop Show.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
See you.